1-week season.
Oh, gee. To a great start.
There you go.
Oh, no. All right. There we go. Sick. OWS fam. The nation, my dudes and dudettes. We're back for Searching for Ceiling. As you just saw, Rich is unable to join us for this week. Unfortunately, he lost power in his neighborhood and it did not come back in time. So the show must go on. We pivot. And that was fellow OWS contributor Mike Johnson. So let's bring him back in here. What's up, Mike?
That was outstanding.
Yes, well-oiled machine.
We are back. Blank faced. What is happening?
I was like, that's a golf course. That's not my background. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we're off to just a blazing start here.
Yes. This is one of my favorite comments, I think, all season. Plot twist, there is no ceiling to search for this week. That is kind of the feel of this slate, is it not?
Yeah, a little bit. It's and it's very different from, we're coming off last week where we had such a big slate and there was a lot of plays. There was the value that opened up. There was Chase Brown, Gesicki. There was some clear spots where it was like, okay, these teams are going to put up a bunch of points, and then it's just how do you account for it? And this week it's a very different animal.
Yeah, and we talk about we're going from a 13-game slate. Now we have a London game. We have a 10-game slate. We have these game environments where we have a couple of games that have some solid game totals, but it's like the 49ers 6.5-point favorites on the road against the Bucs. The Vikings are 7-point favorites on the road against the Jaguars. So it's like, where do we go to search for ceiling here? I have some ideas. So we're going to get into those. And I know you have some ideas. You broke down half of the edge games. For those that are new, for those that are not familiar with Mike and I write all the games up at OWS, except for a couple that Pappy also chips in with each week as well. But Mike is one of the best FanDuel players I have come to know. So we keep getting comments every week about hey, where's the FanDuel content? We might get some nuggets about FanDuel from Mikey here. But the show must go on. Again, if you're just joining us, Rich Hribar, unfortunately, his power is out. So we move on and we pivot. So looking at the slate, Mike, I mentioned the Vikings, who have a hefty 25.25 game or team total. We have the 49ers 28.5 team total, and we've got the Eagles at 25.5. Behind them, it's like we have the Chiefs against the Broncos with 24.75 team total. We have the Jets against the Cardinals with a 24.25 team total. We have the Bills against the Colts with a 25.5 team total. Where are you looking at for some hidden upside here?
You talked about the Bills there, and they're a team to me that seems like, specific to the week, I have a lot of interest there with Josh Allen, with the ceiling that he can provide. You take Keon Coleman out of the mix. It kind of condenses some things. Kincaid, Cooper, Cooper's had the injury. I think he's going to go though. Shakir, like last week I talked about Josh Allen. He was a guy on FanDuel I was high on. He had the 3-touchdown game, but you had these other quarterback performances and all Allen's touchdowns went to the ancillary guys. But you have the Colts defense who they played well against the Vikings last week, and it's kind of a similar team total I think that the Vikings had, but those are two very different animals, the Vikings offense and the Bills offense. Sam Darnold is not Josh Allen. And it's just kind of inversely, the Vikings are an offense that it has a lot of good pieces that are high priced around this kind of game manager plus quarterback in Darnold. And the Bills are a team that they've got this alien quarterback, Josh Allen, that can, take them for 5 touchdowns in a given week. And so I think that the Colts defense probably looked a little bit better last week in that dynamic than maybe they're going to when you're dealing with such a unique specimen in Josh Allen.
And I was muted. Well-oiled machine, baby. Hey, where's Rich? Yeah, we unfortunately, if you're just joining us, we had to pivot. Rich lost power in his neighborhood, so Mike Johnson from OWS. We
Back
move
with
on.
me.
Yes, baby. No, dude, I haven't seen your face in a while on the airwaves, so this is cool. Talking about the Bills, it's this weird case for me where it's like nobody in this offense is kind of seeing featured usage. Uh, Does Amari Cooper step into that? He got up to a 50% snap rate in week 8 and then missed week 9. But it's like all of these players are kind of playing this like not like situational roles, but like they don't have a clear defined like alpha. Even you look at the backfield. James Cook, probably will surprise a lot of people to hear this, but James Cook has not played over 61% of the offensive snaps in any game this season. We have Ty Johnson, who's available for the change of pace guy. We have Ray Davis, who they'll bring in for a breather type back. They've featured him when he's been on the field, so that's kind of interesting as well. But like this backfield is a 1A and then BC, like behind James Cook. Keon Coleman is going to be out, but who takes his role? I would guess it's probably not going to be like somebody directly steps into his role. Amari Cooper would be the most natural fit for that, but he just joined the team 3 weeks ago. He missed an entire week of practice. So this is an interesting spot where, yeah, we expect the offense to succeed, but it feels so uncomfortable to say with a high degree of confidence, like I know where that production is going. Khalil Shakir by far leads the team in efficiency metrics, but he's playing 69, 58, 53, 59, 55% of the offensive snaps like the list goes on. So where do we go in this offense? And I think just saying like, I'm going to bet on Josh Allen succeeding and saying, I'll mix and match the pieces behind, or I'll take, and this is what we like to talk about, these like these focused bets we're making. You're not necessarily saying like I know who from the Bills is going to succeed here. Excuse me. You're just saying like I expect the offense to score some points, and I can make a targeted bet saying it's highly likely that a lot of those points are flowing through Josh Allen. And now we have these like kind of guys who are priced cheaper than they should be in a game without Keon Coleman, to say just like I'm just going to bet on the offense. And this slate surprise looks rather gross on paper. So we have a little bit more leeway to make those type of bets where it's like we don't have the same level of confidence as a standard week, but we can just say I'm going to bet on this offense. And there's some other places that I think we can also do that. So I'm glad we talked about the Bills first. Now I want to talk about the 49ers. The 49ers, man, have the highest Vegas implied team total on the slate at 28.5 points. They're playing a clear pass funnel matchup, a team in the Bucs. And this is also a spot where the Bucs run defense has relatively underperformed what we've come to expect under Todd Bowles with a healthy Vita Vea. But that's the problem. This offense or this defense hasn't had a healthy Vita Vea all season. He's been on the injury report all season. He missed that one game. So is the absence of a healthy Vita Vea, does that shift anything for you with Christian McCaffrey coming back this week?
You know, I think Christian McCaffrey, like he is just like I talked about it early in the year. I do the afternoon games usually because I write the afternoon only content. So I'm like always writing 49ers because West Coast.
Yeah.
But it's something I talk about a lot was losing him just changes the whole dynamic of the offense. Like there's portions of the playbook that just like are no longer accessible. And so getting him back, I don't know if him specifically, I don't know that we can expect him to put up a 35-point game right out the gates, but what he opens up for this offense, I mean, I'm fully expecting them to run roughshod over this Bucs team. The Bucs, looking at, recently they gave up 30 points to the Chiefs, 31 to the Falcons, 41 to the Ravens, 27 to the Saints with Spencer Rattler, 36 to the Falcons in that Thursday night game. And going a step further, I was, this week I had the Falcons Saints game, and I was just when you texted, I was doing the DFS interpretation for that. And like Kirk Cousins, he's scored over 20 DraftKings points twice this season, twice.
Yeah.
Both were against the Bucks. And so, you look at, comparably, Bijan CMC, you got some receiving talent. It's not apples for apples, but like they're both kind of pocket type passers that thrive off the guys around them. And yeah, it's like, I mean, it just seems like an absolute smash spot for the 49ers offense as a whole.
Yeah. So if we have all this uncertainty about CMC, his snap rate, how much he's going to be involved, he's still priced at 8K, which is the third highest priced running back. Are you looking at taking any shots on CMC, or are you kind of just looking for the rest of the offense?
I think if I do play CMC, I'm going to play him with Purdy.
Yeah, I like
Because
that.
I think that if he with all the other running backs available on the slate, and especially at the higher price, like you're going to need him to be putting up that like 35-point type game, like Saquon Barkley's game last week.
Yeah.
And if that's happening, the 49ers offense is putting together a bunch. Now you can include another 49ers piece, whether it's Debo or Kittle or even, Jennings or Pearsall at the cheaper end with that. But I think if I'm playing CMC, my bet is basically, okay, the 49ers are scoring like 5 touchdowns, and I'm gonna soak up all of them.
Yeah, I like that call as well. Also, looking at kind of the question that we ask with the 49ers is typically not, are they going to succeed on offense? It's typically like, can we narrow down where the production is likeliest to flow? With Brandon Ayuk out now, we have a little bit more condensed nature of this offense. Looking at Debo Samuel, I mean, he hasn't seen more than 7 targets, I think, since week 2. Let me double check that. Yeah, he hasn't seen more than 7 targets since week 2. He's been banged up. He picked up the rib thing before their bye week. He's managed limited practices coming back this week, but he's still very clearly dealing with some injury issues. I mean, he dealt with the soft tissue stuff earlier in the season. Now he's dealing with the rib stuff. We also, the secondary aspect of that discussion is typically with George Kittle, we're looking to opposing pressure rates to kind of get a better idea of how often he's going to be in a route. Because this is a guy, a tight end that can do it all. He can block with the best of them. He can act like a sixth offensive lineman. And typically in matchups where they're able to generate a lot of pressure, we see his route rate goes down. He is in to block and protect and to chip. His routes are typically lower ADOT because a lot of what he's doing is chip and goes. But in this spot, the Buccaneers, they're blitzing at a 27.6% frequency this season, which is lower half of the league, right around the median. That said, they're generating pressure only 21.2% of the time. So that is a massive difference between blitz rate and pressure rate. So this spot to me sets up for George Kittle to be able to be in a route, have a deeper ADOT, and he's playing a Buccaneers team that is like median against wide receivers, and they're third to last in production allowed to tight ends. So I love the spot for George Kittle. I think he is viable as a one-off from this team because we're kind of looking to this team as one of the primary points of emphasis on the slate, saying like we expect the 49ers to score some points, as you talked about. So I really like George Kittle as a way to access this offense. I think you can play him by himself. I think you can pair him with Brock Purdy plus somebody else. They're getting Jawan Jennings back. They're getting CMC back. So any of these guys kind of make a solid like game environment, team environment bet, but it kind of starts with Kittle for me. Any thoughts on that?
No, I love it. And yeah, especially like on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel. I play on both sites, but on FanDuel, he's like 8K, which I wouldn't say he's like completely out of the discussion there, but like
Yeah.
that's the equivalent on DraftKings of like if he were 6,800 to 7,000.
Yeah.
So like 5,800, I mean, he's arguably the top tight end in the league right now. And like you said, this matchup, they're going to score points. He's going to run a lot of routes. He's like wildly talented. It's like a don't overthink it type spot to me.
Yeah. So that brings in this question. This is where we were going next. So beautiful timing, UE 2K. Yeah, whatever. Butchered. Yes, can the Bucks provide pushback? So let's look at the Bucks. The beautiful thing about the Buccaneers this season is they're still blitzing at a similar Todd Bowles-esque rate, but they're not generating pressure at the same rate. They also are third in the league in pass rate over expectation. So this is why they're fifth in the league in scoring. They're fifth to last in the league in points allowed per game. This is why we're getting all these like blow up games from the game environments that are involving the Buccaneers this season. They are aggressive on offense. Liam Cohen is taking shots. Baker Mayfield is standing in, taking shots. So yeah, like I think the Bucks can provide some pushback here. And when we're looking at what they have left amongst their pass catchers, Jalen McMillan, I would expect him not to go this week again after suffering a hamstring injury on Friday of last week. We know Mike Evans is doubtful, unlikely to play through their bye week next week. Chris Godwin out for the season. So what do they have in this offense left? They have the running backs who are both capable pass catchers. Well, I should say all three because Sean Tucker is getting involvement as well. But it becomes very hard to play one of those guys when it is this three-headed attack. You look at the pass catchers that they have left. Cade Otton has stepped into the primary role in this offense. He has double-digit targets in 3 straight games. He is being utilized as the primary point of emphasis through the air for these guys. So now that brings into question, like, hey, we're not typically in the habit of targeting tight ends against San Francisco because of one guy by the name of Fred Warner. To me, Cade Otton is going to be moved around the formation enough to say, like, he's not going to see Fred Warner on all of his snaps and all of his routes. He is, however, probably going to see Fred Warner at a high rate in the red zone. So that lowers his upside a little bit, but he has enough volume, has a clear path to double-digit targets. We know the Buccaneers are going to be slinging the ball around the yard. So Cade Otton is a very interesting way to gain access to this game environment as well. And if I'm playing Cade Otton, if Cade Otton is succeeding, he's going to need touchdowns. That directly correlates to Baker. So I love actually a Baker Mayfield, Cade Otton, George Kittle starting point from this game environment. And now we're playing 2 tight ends. It feels so gross, but these are 2 tight ends that compare them to the prices of the wide receivers in their range, and they have just as much, if not more, upside here. So, and then from there, it's the same discussion as Josh Allen, where you're saying, like, I'm not saying I know where the production is going from the Tampa wide receivers, but we can sprinkle in Sterling Shepard if he plays, and he added a hip injury to his hamstring injury that he's dealing with. We can say, if Baker Mayfield is returning a GPP viable score, it probably is because of some downfield component. Raheem Jarrett is sitting here with like an 18.2 ADOT, way down there. So Raheem Jarrett played the most snaps in this offense a week ago at 84%. You're just saying, like, hey, if Baker Mayfield is returning a GPP worthy score, volume is probably going to Cade Otton. Downfield yardage could be Raheem Jarrett. So like a nice tidy stack of like Baker Mayfield, Raheem Jarrett, and Cade Otton, and then getting our San Francisco exposure through whoever you want. But I like George Kittle, and saying I'm just going to bet on this game environment being the one you needed, I think is really, really a clean way to search for ceiling on this slate. Thoughts on the Bucks before we continue?
You had me until you went with Baker.
Baker, dude. I'm going to stop you now. We're going to talk about Baker. Baker Mayfield. Now that we're here, Baker Mayfield, we got to talk about him. Baker Mayfield has put up a 4x salary multiplier on his week 10 salary 5 times already this season, and he has come close in another game. So we're looking at like a 60% frequency. Wait, public math, they played 9 games, 5 out of 9. Oh no. Like a 60, whatever. 56%, 55.55, 55.55. There it is. Somewhere around there. Frequency of hitting a 4x salary multiplier. He's come close. If we go 6 out of 9, 66.6%, he is putting up a GPP viable score this season. Like, yes, they don't have their pass catchers, but that does not discount the fact that Liam Cohen is remaining aggressive. Baker Mayfield is remaining aggressive. And if they want to stay afloat in the NFC South, they're 2 games back of Atlanta. They need a win this season or this week before they go into their bye. So that's my Baker Mayfield potential upside.
Fair enough. I was mostly just tongue in cheek.
Yeah. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. What are your thoughts on Tampa?
Yeah, no, I mean, you kind of like laid it out. I think the worry there is, for me, like the thing with Baker is he's basically the same price as Purdy. And I don't know that, like, does Baker get there without Purdy also getting there? And then if that's the case, then why take the systemic risk on Baker? Or like, what are you really gaining? But I guess maybe the next step in that thought process is, okay, like, play CMC then, because the way Purdy might not get there is if CMC runs in 2 or 3 touchdowns or something. But I mean, in general, yeah, I think the spot makes a ton of sense. I kind of alluded to it. I think my concern with the Bucs is just systemically. You keep taking these guys out. Like, now you're talking about like the backups. You've removed Evans and Godwin, and now they might be without McMillan and Shepard. So what does that look like? And they're playing a pretty good secondary, but they're so cheap. What do they what do they need to really get there? I do think on a shorter slate like this, with only 10 games on the main slate on DraftKings, I can see, just turning it in. I think maybe multiple 49ers pieces, because if Baker does get there, and he's pulling, like, with Jarrett and Otten, if they're both getting there, I think the 49ers are going to win this game. I think they're going to win it rather handily. So if the Bucs score 3 touchdowns, they score 24 points, you're probably looking at like a 38-24 type outcome is kind of my thought on it. So, on a short slate, you could probably just go with multiple 49ers, and you've only got a couple spots left to fill on that roster.
Yeah. So, sorry, wrong thing. Is Baker worth the risk when Purdy is only $100 more? There is a difference here. We can't just compare Baker straight to Purdy, because Deebo Samuel is one of the top 5 highest priced wide receivers, because Christian McCaffrey is the 3rd highest priced running back, because George Kittle is the 2nd highest priced tight end. There's 2 differences. One is the stacking partners for Baker Mayfield are much cheaper. Kate Otten, you get a discount on all those guys. Raheem Jarrett, like we talked about, is $3,600. And on this slate, where pricing is very tight, we don't have a lot of value, we're going to have to make some calculated risk type bets, saying like, okay, we're not saying like Raheem Jarrett is going to be the wide receiver that you need on the slate. We're saying if Baker Mayfield succeeds, it becomes that much more likely that part of the reason that he succeeds is Raheem Jarrett catches a long touchdown, or Kate Otten catches multiple touchdowns. So it's this like looking at the slate and saying, we're probably not going to need 240 points to ship GPPs this week. We're probably going to need 195, 200 around there. So if I can make this targeted bet on this offense succeeding, I can capture a 4x multiplier and get my difference makers somewhere else. The second difference is Brock Purdy is currently expected to garner the highest ownership on the slate at the quarterback position, 17.6%. Baker Mayfield is about 25% of that at 4.2-ish%. So what does that tell me? And the way that I conceptualize ownership is the field is telling me that if we played this slate 100 times, Brock Purdy would score more points than Baker Mayfield 80 times, and Baker Mayfield would outscore Brock Purdy 20 times. Based on the ownership, his ownership is 4 times higher. If that's the rough calculation, how often would Baker Mayfield, if we played out the slate 100 times, how often would Baker Mayfield outscore Brock Purdy on the slate? Is it higher than 20% of the time? If it is, that's leverage. That's inherent leverage. So it's just breaking it down into like the most digestible math that we can. That's kind of what the ownership levels are telling us this week. So all of that combines to me to say like, yeah, I'm okay betting on Baker Mayfield, who has this proven track record of success this season because of the current state of the offense, because of the offensive coordinator change, because this team is not hitting home on their blitzes as much. They're not creating as much disruption on defense because they're allowing the 5th most points per game this season. They've had to remain aggressive. So yeah, like I'm okay even adding multiple 49ers to like a Brock Purdy, Raheem Jarrett, Kate Otten stack. You could add in George Kittle and CMC and just attack this game environment. But like there is a difference fundamentally between Baker Mayfield and Brock Purdy. And it's not only that they're $100 difference in pricing. Hopefully that answers that question. You have anything to add to that discussion?
Yeah, I think I think you laid out a lot of really good points there, and I think it kind of plays similar to like the Browns that we were on a couple weeks ago, like with like, the cheap stacking partners and kind of what it all opens up. I also think that as you were talking there, and I'm just looking through things, like I talked about Josh Allen at the start, Jalen Hurts also in a really good spot.
Yeah,
They're only $1,200-$1,300 more than Baker. So I think everything that we're talking about, like there's going to be some Bucs receivers who get there. Like that's really what it comes down to. And then whether it becomes Baker or not, and I think he probably does post a strong game, but it's like, does he really separate? If he does, then there's probably like 3 guys getting there for the Bucs. And otherwise, like it's very conceivable that you could play Otten plus Palmer or Otten plus Jarrett, or like a block of 2 Bucs, and just from the volume in assuming they're going to have to throw a ton when they fall behind, that block can get there even if Baker doesn't. And maybe the play then is like, okay, you've saved all this money. Now you can get that elite quarterback who might put up a 35-point game. And whether you stack them or not, it's just from a standpoint of, like you said, it's probably 195 to 200 point week. So if Allen goes for 37 points or Hurts goes for 37 points, there's a ton of value in that. Like even forgetting like maybe Baker has the same or a better multiplier, but just the raw points, what that can do for you.
Yeah, now we're getting into like the deep theoretical components of the slate, in that like raw points probably matter a little bit more than like saying this salary multiplier, because there's likely to be fewer players that go for 25 plus fantasy points, that go for 30 plus fantasy points on this slate. And there's 2 offenses, in my opinion, that we probably should be accounting for on all the rosters that we put into play. It's the 49ers that we already discussed, and then it's the Eagles that you just brought up. The Eagles playing this Dallas Cowboys team that is bottom 5 in pretty much every defensive metric you look at. It's highly likely that one of these guys, maybe more, puts up a tourney winning type score. If we had value opened up, I'd be like, start your roster with like Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, and just say like, these guys are highly likely to combine for 60 fantasy points, and we'll take the points and we'll move on and figure out the rest. But we don't have the value really on the slate to make that like targeted bet. So now it becomes, the Eagles are like first in the league in rush rate over expectation. They are the most run heavy offense since their week 5 bye. Saquon Barkley has all eyes on him after just continuing to do all this Superman shit, like a backwards hurdle. Come on, man. Dude, this dude's incredible. So like, but at the same time, we don't have the value, the value to open up the like paying up for Saquon. So I don't expect his ownership level to be kind of off the chart. I mean, right now he's expected 7.5% ownership. To me, it's just like, this guy has put up 35 fantasy points or more 3 times already this season, and he's in a very, very winnable matchup against the Cowboys. So I really like George Kittle as an access point to San Francisco. In the same discussion points, I really like Saquon as an access point to an offense that we expect to succeed here. How are you seeing the Eagles on this side of the matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote this game up as well, and it's just like the further I dove into it, the more you could see like the more you could see how perfectly this sets up for the Eagles. The Eagles, since their bye week, they're last in the league in pass rate over expectation. They're just like pounding the rock. They're running it very, very well. Dallas, their secondary is not great. They're not getting the same amount of pressure. They've got some injuries, but their run defense has been like really bad. And kind of how Philly wants to attack you is they're going to run the ball. They're going to shove it down your throat. And then as the defenses adjust and they collapse and bring guys up and try to contain that run, they're going to take some deep shots. They're going to open things up and make some plays down the field. That's kind of schematically and philosophically how they're approaching things right now. And how Dallas has operated is basically they're getting bludgeoned early in games and then having to adjust. And they're most susceptible to the running game. Their big passing games that they're giving up, it's kind of because they're doing exactly what opponents of the Eagles are having to do where they adjust. So like, I just think the Eagles are going to come out and just run all over them. Eventually there will be some big plays down the field, but like this could get real ugly real quick for Dallas. In my edge write-up, I talked about, the Cowboys. I mean, McCarthy's probably getting fired after they get embarrassed here.
Yeah. We were calling for it potentially last week too.
Yeah. And it's like staggering looking at some of the stats. So like, the Lions game, the Falcons and the 49ers, and then the Ravens, Saints, the Steelers, like all these games, they fall behind like incredibly in the first three quarters. They're like first 3 quarters splits are horrendous. Like they're just like basically it looks way better on paper than it should because Dak Prescott has like worked some fourth quarter magic and garbage time to like kind of save face a little bit, but now he's not even there. Like this could be really bad.
Yeah, and with this backfield, I mean, I know like if it gets really bad and the Eagles are up by 4 scores in the fourth quarter, we've seen Saquon like pull himself out of the game. Like when they were playing the Giants and they were up massive, he was like, "Yo, let the youngsters eat." So that's a very real risk here. But Saquon Barkley is one of the true workhorse backs remaining in the league. So if you're saying
still dropped 30 in that game, so
yeah, if you're saying like the Eagles have scored 35 points in the first 3 quarters, it's highly likely that Saquon is accounting for some of those scores, right? So I think the risk of like Saquon being out of the game in the fourth quarter is minimized here because he had to contribute in some way on the way up there. So yeah, I really like Saquon. Are you at all looking to just like bet on this offense and say like Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, and Saquon? Is there any way to fit that in this week?
No, I mean, for me, I think that's like the salaries just preclude it, in my opinion. Like you're probably looking at someone getting squeezed out, or a couple of them having like okay games for like your season-long fantasy team, but not like. I think the 3 of them, it's probably costing you like half of your salary. So yeah, it's probably a no for me there. But I do think that, I think having like on FanDuel, I'll probably have one of Brown or Barkley on a large percentage of my rosters. On DraftKings, like I think you could play Barkley or Brown with Hurts. I probably won't play Barkley and Brown together just because of like I don't know that Brown pays off his salary, and with the other high-priced running backs that you're probably sacrificing to get to Brown, I don't know that he pays off his salary in the game where Saquon also has 30 to 35. But I do think like Hurts plus Barkley is very viable because Barkley can catch one, and even if he doesn't, like Barkley can have 2 touchdowns, Hurts can throw 2 and run 1 in, and like they just combine for 65 points. And like we talked about, the raw points there are just like so valuable.
Yeah, I like that shout a good bit. I think if you want to just bet on the Eagles, I think the clearest way to do that is by pairing the quarterback with the running back. And that's just not something that a lot of the field is going to be looking to do. So a lot of leverage there as well. Sweet. Any interest on the other side of this game with Cooper Rush and a hobbled AC joint CD who might not play? Any interest in any of the Cowboys?
Not really. I can kind of see, this isn't like a recommended play, but I guess maybe, Cavante Turpin makes some sense to me, just as like I could see them getting him more involved as just as a means to try to move the offense because their running game struggles. Lamb is a little banged up. Ferguson makes a little bit of sense, as the with Rush maybe targeting the tight end position. I don't know what his pass splits are, but just a backup quarterback, kind of leaning on a tight end when the Eagles have been good against perimeter receivers recently. That would make some sense, but within the context of the slate, like when you've got Otten a couple $100 more, Kittle a few $100 more,
Yeah.
It's kind of tougher to pull the trigger there. I guess my point is I could see maybe one of those guys getting there, but I don't think it's like definitely not a spot where you need to bring back because they could just get run.
Yeah. There is another gross spot kind of in the same discussion as the Buccaneers that I think has some potential hidden upside here. And it's with the Chargers. The Chargers are playing a Titans team that has been good defensively this season, but they also just placed Quandre Diggs on IR. They have been without L'Jarius Sneed, who looks unlikely again this week. They're missing a linebacker. I forgot who it was, but this well-oiled defensive machine is kind of experiencing some knocks. They've got some knocks going on under the hood. So can Justin Herbert, who we know that they've been a little bit more pass biased since their week 5 bye. I mean, against the Broncos, 34 pass attempts, Cardinals, 39 pass attempts, the Saints in a game that they handled handily, 32 pass attempts against the Browns, who again, they relatively blew out 27-10, 27 pass attempts. Is this a spot where Justin Herbert, who has some cheap stacking partners, could give us a little bit of salary flexibility here, priced at only 5,200?
Yeah, again, you're teeing them up for me. This I wrote up this game too, so appreciate you bringing up the ones I know what I'm talking about. I do think you look at the Chargers; they have since their Week 5 bye as well. They've gone the opposite way of the Eagles, increasing their pass rate. Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh, they come in. We want to run the ball. We want to be a ground and pound team, but like they just haven't been very efficient at doing it. And the Titans
Yeah.
defense is a solid unit, but they kind of break down over time, I guess, because their offense has kind of been so inept that like, how many times can you as a defense, like you get a stop and then the offense goes out 3 and out, you're right back out there. It kind of wears on you. So that pass rate I think is going to be sticky. And I do think that the Chargers, yeah, I mean, Herbert at, 5,300, is he?
52, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's definitely very in play. And it's not as concentrated as some spots, but between Ladd and QJ and Palmer, you've got the receiving core is going to soak up probably 60 to 75% of the targets. Those 3 core receivers. They've got some, they'll do an end around to Rager sometimes, or they got some tight ends that they'll throw it to, but that's generally how they're going to attack. And I think that that's probably what they're going to need to do to build a lead in this spot.
Yeah, I mean they have DJ Chark coming back. He's expected to be active for the first time this season. I don't expect that to eat into the roles of any of these 3 primary guys. QJ is seeing a lot of schemed usage. Lad McConkey is kind of the trusty rusty over the middle of the field. And Josh Palmer has the 20th deepest ADOT this season at 13.0. So his role is very clearly defined as well. It becomes this like, if I am betting on the Chargers succeeding, we're going to need the touchdowns to come through the air. So this is a spot where the Justin Herbert has thrown no more than 2 touchdowns in a game this season. He does not have a rushing score. So what you're effectively saying is I need him to throw for 3 touchdowns and or go for 300 yards or more. at 5,200, it's not this, we're not in salary multiplier range. We still need the raw points. So even though this stack is so cheap, even though we have these cheap quarterback with cheap pass catchers, I still am thinking about this team through the lens of where do those yards come from? How does Herbert throw for more than 300 here? Where do the touchdowns come from? And that immediately makes me think like Ladd McConkey is probably last on the list of stacking partners that I want with Justin Herbert. He's a guy that has seen no more than 8 targets in any game this season. His ADOT is very, very modest. He's working low per target upside routes over the middle of the field. So I have Josh Palmer, who has a solid 13.0 ADOT. The bet to me is if I'm playing Justin Herbert, I want it to be probably with Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer, because these are one, QJ, you're getting the schemed usage and the per target upside. And then Josh Palmer, who has more than 63, I think, receiving yards in the last 3 weeks. Let me double check that. Yeah, 63 or more yards through the air in all of the last 3 games. So you're saying if Herbert is getting there to 300 yards, it's probably coming through a deep shot to Josh Palmer. If he's scoring multiple touchdowns, we have the red zone schemed usage guy in Quentin Johnston that is getting 1 or 2 of those touchdowns. So that's where we can make these targeted bets. I'm not saying like Ladd McConkey is a bum. Like, he is beautiful on the field. It's magic. It's poetry in motion watching him run routes. But at the same time, he's highly unlikely to see more than 7, 8 targets. And he's not a big bodied pass catcher in the red zone. So yeah, like I think there's upside in Justin Herbert with QJ and Josh Palmer. Any thoughts to add on to that?
No, I mean, yeah, I think it all makes sense. And like with the Chark thing, with him coming back, I would be more concerned about him if their passing offense was like struggling, right? He's not like this isn't like CMC coming back where it's like clearly this guy is like you got to have him on the field. I do think DJ Chark is a solid player, but like their passing offense is kind of in its groove. So like, okay, DJ Chark is back. Does that mean that you're going to mess up, who your core 3 receivers have been as you're kind of starting to find your groove and you're in the playoff hunt at 5-3? I would tend to think no. So, yeah, I can get on board with that for sure.
All right, man. We talked about 2 of these late games. We talked about the 49ers and the Buccaneers. What about another one of these early games in a spot we expect the offense to succeed, but again, it hasn't been a voluminous offense, and that's the Minnesota Vikings. They're playing a team in the Jaguars who is back to running a high rate of man coverage, but they have Darnell Savage back in the secondary. They have, oh God, what's his name? What's their cornerback's name? Jesus, like all pro dude. Drawing a blank. Anyway, with those 2 guys back, they have been running over 40% man coverage. And you talk about Justin Jefferson man coverage.
Campbell?
Yes, Tyson Campbell. Thank you. Tyson Campbell. I stayed up till 2 last night writing the Edge game, so I'm struggling. Anyway, we're back. Tyson Campbell and Darnell Savage. They have been on the field together for 4 games this season. In those 4 games, the Jaguars are running 43% man coverage rates, which would lead the league over the entire season. So knowing that, but also knowing that like Tyson Campbell is a legitimate lockdown type cornerback, probably going to see a ton of Justin Jefferson. This is kind of the reason why this Jaguars team is kind of middle of the pack against opposing wide receiver 1s, but they're allowing the 2nd most fantasy points per game to wide receiver 2s this season. So talking about value, is this a spot where we can say like, I can make this targeted bet and get access to Minnesota, an offense that we don't expect to fail, through a guy like Jordan Addison?
Potentially. Yeah, I mean, it's not a spot. I guess I'm not at the spot thus far where I've dug into that. I mean, I could see it. I think we haven't seen it yet with him, like with like a really big game. He had the 2 touchdown game against the Packers when he came back. I think he scored last Sunday against the Colts. Generally, his target count has not been, through the roof, but he does, he has the skill set. Like we know he can hit some big plays. We know, like you said, they're going to play a high rate of man coverage. They're going to kind of be open to it. I think Devontae Smith had a nice game last week, who's kind of profiles somewhat similarly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he's a guy that it makes sense, and I hadn't like been drawn to him so far as I've like been building and stuff. So sometimes those are kind of the spots where it's like, oh yeah, like on Sunday afternoon, you're like, oh yeah, Jordan Addison, that makes sense.
Yeah. So the whole like idea of the show is to search for those type of players, and he very clearly has ceiling in this spot. And yes, like we're not going to see a ton of pass attempts from Sam Darnold. This is a team where their defense has been so good, and now they're playing an opponent where they're not going to have their top quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is likely going to be out. So we're going to get a Mac Jones-led Jacksonville Jaguars. But this is a spot where you're effectively saying, like, I expect the Vikings to succeed offensively, and I get this spot where it's a very clear pass funnel matchup, and Justin Jefferson is probably going to see a ton of Tyson Campbell with Darnell Savage help kind of as that strong side safety over the top. So it's just this focused bet on the offense and saying I can access the upside of this offense through Jordan Addison. So like, would it shock us? We wake up on Monday and we're like, oh yeah, Jordan Addison went 6 for 102 and 2. That is within his range of outcomes here. And I think that's a solid bet at only 5,300 on DK. Anything of note from this really reeling Jacksonville Jaguars team?
No, I mean, I think, there's Mac Jones is, kind of the wild card there as far as, the Vikings. I mean, they kind of showed last week. I mean, obviously age wise, Jones isn't the same as like Joe Flacco, but I mean, am I wrong? I don't think Mac Jones is especially like elusive, or like,
No.
yeah. So, I mean, you just saw how Flacco struggled so much on Sunday night just with the pressure that Brian Flores and the Vikings bring. I think the idea of like a really cheap quarterback, like always, it seems nice in theory. It's kind of hard to see it getting there in this spot, so yeah, I mean, maybe Parker Washington sub 4K, who I think is a decent player, but like losing Lawrence definitely affects the outlook for the rest of the guys, I guess.
Yeah, and like Lawrence is going to be out. We have Brian Thomas Jr., Gabe Davis, Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, all who have not had a full practice yet this week. They've all been limited in every session. This team is reeling, man, and they are not in a good spot to put up a fight. So that brings in the Minnesota Vikings defense. I think you can play the Vikings defense with Jordan Addison and just say like, hey, we're going to get the 31 pass attempts from Sam Darnold and we catch 2 touchdowns, and then the defense just takes over. I think that is a high upside way to look at the Vikings this week as well.
So potentially this could be a blowout too. And like my background, we could have, I could take McCarthy and Doug Peterson golfing next week.
Yes, that would be great. I've been so underwhelmed with Doug Peterson in Jacksonville. We used to look at Doug Peterson as this guy that was like pushing the tempo, pushing the game environment on his own, and he has been so reactive, and not in a good way, like not in a like Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur way, in a oh shit, I have not planned for this way. So I don't know, man. Yeah, I'm ready for Peterson to be gone personally. Yeah. All right, I'll throw it to you. Any other spot that you see on the early portion of the slate where we can be searching for some ceiling here?
And this one might not get anyone too excited. Maybe it will. I don't know where everybody's at, but the Bears Patriots game, the Bears again, speaking of coaches, Shane Waldron and Eberflus have not been overly impressive, but they have
Yeah.
had some really good games against weaker opponents. They struggled last week against the Cardinals, which I was a little bit surprised by, but also like I think that they're in a pretty good spot this week at home against the Patriots. The Patriots are another team. They've got Drake May, who's kind of been doing everything for them. Um, and what the Bears defense is really, really good at is their perimeter coverage. Their secondary is really locked down. They don't get a high pressure rate. They're not great against the run. You saw the Cardinals kind of running on them. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if the Patriots, who aren't built around their perimeter receivers, when they're moving the ball, it's probably going to be more, Hunter Henry, Ramondre are doing some heavy lifting. Drake May kind of spreading the ball out, maybe making some plays with his legs. So I think it's a spot where with those situations, and then with kind of the sour taste that everyone has in their mouth about Chicago at this point, it wouldn't be surprising to me if like a Caleb Williams, DJ Moore were to hit in this spot, or even just like, you've throwing DJ Moore with like a Drake May and Hunter Henry, or like a skinny stack with Ramondre and DJ Moore, something like that.
Do you think there's anything in the home road splits of the Chicago Bears? They're averaging 28.0 points per game at home and 17.6 on the road. That is the biggest delta in the league this year.
I thought, it's funny you mentioned that because last week I obviously had the afternoon games with they were in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought was like, well, yeah, these seem kind of stark, but I think it's more about the opponent. But then they played the Cardinals defense, who hasn't been great, and they really, really struggled. So it's like maybe this home road thing is more the deal. But yeah, I think that. I mean, I think somebody. I'm here just firing everybody today.
Yeah.
I mean, if they can't move the ball against the Patriots at home and they lose this game, or like it's really ugly, like is Shane Waldron there on Monday? I mean, it's
that was one of the more perplexing hires this offseason. I have gone so far as to name him Shane Bumdrin. You go to 1 week season, you'll see that in the write up. I call him Shane Bumdrin. But yeah, dude, I don't know.
Did you ever see the clip of JSN when after the Bears hired? It was like at the combine or sometime before the draft, after the Bears had hired Waldron, and then
No.
whoever was interviewing him asked him about like what he's got to say to Caleb or to somebody like about like,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Good luck."
Shit. No, I didn't see that. That's hilarious. Yeah, with the Patriots, it's an interesting perspective because Hunter Henry and Demario Douglas have combined for 40 targets in Drake May's last 2 starts. So that's pretty notable. The fact that this team is seeing, or these 2 guys are like seeing such a high rate of targets, or maybe that's in Drake May's 3 starts. I think that's in his 3 starts. The 40 combined targets. So yeah, like it's Demario Douglas, another slot wide receiver. He's not going to play more than 60 to 70% of the offensive snaps, but he's seeing a high target per route run rate. Hunter Henry, again, this kind of the way that they move the ball. So I think, and it was popped in a chat here, I think May plus Douglas plus Henry plus Swift is viable on this type of slate setup. So I like that call a good bit. All right. We're to the point of the show where we typically ask for the out the door, the gross, but I feel like this entire show we've been talking about the gross stuff. So my out the door shot here is I don't think we can forget about Alvin Kamara. And I don't know if the field will either. Let me check. Yeah, he's expected to see 30% ownership, which makes me like Saquon even more because they're priced right next to each other. But Alvin Kamara coming off a 38 opportunity game, 29 carries and 9 targets. He is this offense right now. They've got guys like Mason Tipton who are being asked to run heavy routes. Juwan Johnson, Taysom is there, but he's kind of still not seeing his role grow. It's basically just Alvin Kamara. So if the Saints are going to do anything to try and save their season, probably comes through Kamara here in a winnable spot. I really like pairing Kamara with Saquon because that's probably not going to be done at a high frequency this week. Yeah, that's my out the door shot. I came up with that before I looked at ownership, so it's not really surprising anybody. But do you have any out the door shots here of guys like we should not be forgetting about this week?
Yeah, I mean, like you, I haven't gotten. I was a last minute call up.
Yeah, bring in the lefty
practice squad. But the thing that stands out to me, I think I just talked about it. Like I think the Bears and Patriots game. I think it has some pass. Now I don't know what the weather's going to be. That's an outdoor game. But I guess I bookended it with that, and then the Bills. I think we need to not forget about Josh Allen because he's right on the doorstep there. And I guess within that game we didn't talk about Jonathan Taylor, who I was really encouraged. Last game was the first game that he played with Joe Flacco as the starter, and he had 5 targets. So if he's able to expand that pass catching role with his skill set, he could be in for some nice games in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, and that's another guy that is a borderline workhorse, maybe a full-fledged workhorse in his healthy games. He ranks first or second in snap rate and opportunity share in his healthy games. So that is a good shout as well. Thanks for sticking with us through the technical difficulties. Big shout out to Mike for jumping on last minute. It was literally game time. It was showtime. And I was like, yo, is anyone around to step in? Because Rich has no power. The electricities are gone. But we'll do our typical shouts here. If you're new here, we do this every week on Friday at noon Eastern. If you are not familiar with 1 week season, head on over to 1 week season, poke around, get signed up for Inner Circle. That'll get you access to all of the inner workings of what we are doing behind the scenes for the theory stuff, for the numbers stuff. And we'll give a shout to Rich. Hopefully he gets his power back on here shortly. But the great Rich Hribar, head on over to Sharp Football Analysis. Use code TAKE25. You'll get 25% off anything on their site, which gets you access to all of Rich's great work. He is Mike. I am Hilow. Until next time, y'all, we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards. Peace.
1 week season.